As you can see, she broke. The spring completely snapped in half. So today I'm going to be putting in a new garage door spring. So I already have my new spring. I ordered it a while back. These springs come in many different sizes, so it's important to get the size correct for your application. And there's 4 things to know about a garage door spring to make sure you get the right one, and I'll show you what those are. So the first thing you need to know is whether it's a right wound spring or a left wound spring. Now on these springs, the cones on the end that the spring wraps around have color indicators on them. If you notice, this one's red and this one is red as well, which means red means it's a right wound spring. If this were black, it would be a left wound spring. Next, I want to get the full length of the spring. I use a tape measure and hook it onto the first coil. And where this spring is broke, I'll measure to here, which is 10 1/4 inches. Then I'll just slide the tape measure over to this coil and measure to the end. And this spring measures 24 1/4 inches. So if you can see, the ends have a little bit of gap in them. So if those were tight, the spring would measure 24 inches. So this is a 24-inch long spring. Now I need to figure out the inside diameter of my spring. To do that, I'll just lift the spring up a little bit so I can get my tape measure across the center and measure from the inside to the inside of the coils. And this spring is 2 inches on the inside. Sometimes the springs have a number on the end here. This one has a 2.0, and that's for a 2-inch spring. So the final measurement I need to get here is to get my wire thickness, the thickness of each one of these windings. To do that, I'm going to count 20 coils and make a mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And just past the 20th, I'm going to put a mark. Or sometimes it's easier to just take a piece of paper or something and slide it between the coils so you know for sure where your 20th coil is. So now I need to measure my 20 coils and see how long they are. So the 20 coils on this spring measure 4 1/8 inch. Now this table will translate the 20 coil measurement to a wire size. So if you look in the left hand column, go down to 4 1/8 inch or 10.52 centimeters in the middle column, you will see in the right hand column the wire size is 0.207. So that tells me the wire thickness of my spring. Now I have the 4 things I need to know about this spring, so I'm ready to order. I know it's a right hand spring, it's 24 inches in length, it has an inside diameter of 2 inches, and the wire thickness is 0.207. I ordered mine off of eBay, but there are plenty of websites out there selling garage door springs. Now I'm ready to replace my spring. First thing I want to do is just disconnect my opener. Next, I'm going to release the set screws on the end of the spring here. Now, since this spring is broke, there's no tension on these set screws, but if I were just replacing a worn out spring that's not broke, there's a lot of tension on this end, and it would have to be slowly released after loosening the set screws. And this set screw uses a 3/8 wrench. Next, I want to take the bolts out of this bearing going to the wall bracket. This takes a 9/16 inch socket and a 9/16 inch wrench. I also wanted to note that if your door has 2 springs, you have to loosen the tension off of both springs, even if just one is broke. And it's also recommended when you're replacing the springs to replace both, even if the one is not broke, because they are only rated for so many winds and unwinding, and if one's broke, the other one will probably break too. So it's best to replace both at the same time. The tension on both springs has to be released before loosening any bolts up here. Now I need to loosen both of these bolts on the drum on the right hand end here. Slide it back. Same thing on the left side. I need to loosen these bolts. Slide it back. Then I'm going to take this bar and slide it to the right. Take this cup off the end and slide my spring off. This new spring came with a new center bearing, so I'm going to pop this out. So this new spring came with the bearing in the end of it, or actually it's a bushing. This needs to be popped out and turned around so it's sticking out of the end of the spring. But really it can be slid on first. And I'll slide the new spring on. Might have to loosen my bolts a little bit. Then I'll slide my drum back on, making sure the set screws are on the inside. And I'll put it back into the bearing at the end here. Slide my cup till it meets the bearing, and then tighten these back down. Now in my case, these cables all come undone when the spring broke, so now I need to bring the cable back up through. And the cable needs to be inside these brackets, like that, but not rubbing anything on this side. And run up through there, inside this bracket. And then on the back side of this cup, there's a notch. So it needs to be fed through that notch, both collars fed through the notch, and hooked onto the notch, and then wound along that groove. And pulled tight. And when it's pulled tight, the cable, just double check and make sure the cable is not hitting or rubbing on anything all the way down to the bottom of the door. And holding it tight, I'm going to put a vice grip on this pipe to keep it from unwinding. On the right hand side, I'll slide my drum to the bearing, hook in my cable. Again, the cable comes up from over the back side of the drum, hooks into this notch, and I'll slide it back so you can see it hooks into the notch and lays in that groove just like that. Slide it all the way to the bearing, and I'll put the same amount of tension on this as I did the other end and tighten these set screws down. It's very important that these cables are both equally tensioned left and right, so it picks the door up evenly instead of crooked. I don't know the torque specs on these, but they need to be good and tight. Okay, back in the center here, I'll slide this bushing in this wall bracket. It should snap in place. And then slide my bearing on top of that. Put my bolts back in. Tighten it back up. So just double checking my cables, I come down here and I see this one is hooked onto the door. So it's good to double check and make sure that it's not hooked onto anything. It needs to be back into that channel. It needs to be behind the roller, outside the door, but inside the track, right up through there. Now I need to retension my pulley on this end, of course. So the only thing left to do is to wind my spring and tighten down these set screws. I'm just using 3/8 inch socket extensions, but they make winding rods for these, which is much safer. So the door I'm working with here is 7 foot tall, and if you see in this table, a 7-foot door requires 31 quarter turns. First one in, I'll go like this, is 1 quarter turn. Stick my second extension in. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Okay, that's where it needs to be. I'm going to pull it out a little bit and tighten down my screws. Very important to get these screws good and tight. Now I need to take my vice grip off that I put on to hold the rod in place. So whenever the spring tension is right, the garage door should stay shut. It shouldn't lift up by itself. And it should stop at halfway, not go up or down by itself. And it should stay all the way up. So, looks like we're good to go.